Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On, and I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we thank you very much for watching. Today, folks, we're going to introduce a little poetry to you, a poem that I have very much enjoyed for about the last 20 years. And then we're going to get into some of the things that are going on today. We're doing a study right now on the histories and cycles of different civilizations, and we're not going to get into that in depth on this show, but I just want to touch the tip of the iceberg, if you would, with some thoughts to make you think about where we are as a civilization, as a people, as a nation. And then we're going to get into what I feel is one of the most grandiose and effective tools that we have as a people to try to turn around and regain some control of our lives. So first, let's start out with this poem. It's rather lengthy, but I enjoy it tremendously, so I thought I would present it to you. And the name of it is A Visitor from the Past. It was written by Thelen Paulk. And I just sit back and listen to the words of this. I think you'll find it rather stimulating and very interesting. I had a dream the other night I didn't understand. A figure walking through the mist with a flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by my bed. He took off his three-cornered hat and, speaking low to me, he said, "We fought a revolution to secure our liberty. We wrote the Constitution as a shield from tyranny. For future generations this legacy we gave, in this the land of the free and home of the brave. The freedoms we secured for you we hoped you'd always keep, but tyrants labored endlessly while your parents were asleep. Your freedom gone, your courage lost, you're no more than a slave in this, the land of the free and home of the brave. You buy permits to travel and permits to own a gun, permits to start a business or to build a place for one. On land you believe you own, you pay a yearly rent, although you have no voice in choosing how the money's spent. Your children must attend a school that doesn't educate. Your Christian values can't be taught according to the state. You read about the current news in a regulated press. You pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Your money is no longer made of silver or of gold. You trade your wealth for paper so your life can be controlled. You pay for crimes that make our nation turn from God in shame. You've taken Satan's number as you've traded in your name. You've given government control to those who do you harm so they can padlock churches and steal the family farm and keep our country deep in debt, put men of God in jail, harass your fellow countrymen while corrupted courts prevail. Your public servants don't uphold the solemn oath they've sworn. Your daughters visit doctors so their children won't be born. Your leaders ship artillery and guns to foreign shores and send your sons to slaughter, fighting other people's wars. Can you regain the freedom from which we fought and died? Or don't you have the courage or the faith to stand with pride? Are there no more values for which you'll fight to save? Or do you wish your children to live in fear and be a slave? Sons of the Republic, arise and take a stand. Defend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. Preserve our great Republic and each God-given right, and pray to God to keep the torch of freedom burning bright. As I awoke, he vanished, and in the midst from hence he came. His words were true, we are not free, we have ourselves to blame. For even now, as tyrants trample each God-given right, we only watch and tremble, too afraid to stand and fight. If he stood by your bedside in a dream while you're asleep, and wondered what remains of the rights he fought to keep, what would be your answer if he called out from the grave, is this still the land of the free and the home of the brave? I just enjoy that poem very, very much, but let's spend a couple of minutes to break that down. first of all, obviously the figure speaking in the night coming to this person is a manifestation of the people that have made these sacrifices to, with their lives and limb, to uphold and keep and create the laws of the Constitution. Okay, there's one thing that we forget, folks. I know, all the wars to American people now all seem to be, at least in my generation, by the grace of God, they've always been in a foreign land. I really believe that in the future, our children are not going to have to read of war to understand them, because as Albert Pike claimed, and what they've been following, is the Third World War will come to America. Unfortunately, we are not far from that procession of a Third World War. Now, when you look at a figure walking through the mist with a flintlock in his hand, his clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by my bed. He took off his three-cornered hat and speaking low, he said. Folks, obviously, this is a process of the flintlock in his hand, the weapon that he was using, and the three-cornered hat, and his clothes were worn and dirty and torn. Obviously, this goes back to the founding era of this country, when the Minutemen, if you would respond. And the reason why they had that name was because they were always at the ready, and they would respond on a minute's notice. And he's saying that, they fought a revolution to secure our liberty. They wrote a constitution as a shield from tyranny. And for future generations, this legacy we gave, in this the land of the free and home of the brave. So he's speaking of the sacrifices that were made and the reasoning why. They did this for future generations, knowing they were leaving a better world, a better life for their future generations. And what have we done with that? We were given this great blessing through their sacrifices, and through our ignorance and apathy, we've lost all of it. As a matter of fact, it's like Goethe said, those who falsely believe they are free. Anyway, I lost it. So that he's speaking again of all the sacrifices made by previous generations, and we have not upheld our part of the deal. We have not stayed vigilant with regards to our liberties. We have not been a good watchman on the tower with regards to what's going on behind the scenes of our government. Folks, we don't even know who our government is. And through our ignorance and through the deception of the public fool system, we falsely believe we live in a democracy. We don't even know that we are a republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the for which it stands. We're not a democracy. Folks, in a democracy, 51% can tell the other 49% what to do. Okay? In a republic, we are all equal under law. As long as I do not encroach or infringe on your rights and or property, the law leaves me alone. I'm not hurting anyone or bothering anyone. They leave me alone. I am sovereign unto myself with these sociable understandings of what is demanded of me through society. Now, society, or I should say the government, is dictating to us. It's been flip-flopped. The freedom we secured for you, we hoped you'd always keep, but tyrants labored endlessly while your parents were asleep. Your freedom's gone, your courage lost, you're no more than a slave in this, the land of the free and home of the brave. Folks, do you remember a couple of shows back we went over the definition of a freeman and a slave? And I asked you to come to determination which one you were? And I think if you honestly and truthfully looked in the mirror, you come to the understanding that you were pretty much a slave, because we are living under the dictates of somebody else. We cannot build a home for ourselves without getting someone else's permission. We can't put a septic system in without getting someone else's permission. We can't drive or travel without getting someone else's permission. We can't purchase anything without paying that someone else a pretty penny. Okay? We can't go and work freely anymore without getting someone else's permission and paying them to do it. So understand where you are in your relationship, and be truthful about it in your relationship, where you are to the government. You buy permits to travel and permits to own a gun, permits to start a business or build a place for one. On land you believe you own, you pay a yearly rent. although you have no voice in choosing how the money's spent. Absolutely true. You got a license to travel, right? You've got permits to buy a gun, and in some places in this country, you can't even, they deny you the right of self-protection. They can't even have a gun. And by the way, look at where the crime is at its highest. The big correlation between crime rates, folks, is who is able to protect themselves and who's not. And let's just say Washington, D.C. and Chicago are some of the highest crime rates in the country, and you're not allowed to have a gun in either one. But in other states, and I'll take the example of Vermont, where you are allowed to have guns and protect yourself and to carry the weapons, year after year after year after year, we are some of the lowest crime rates in the country. And usually we're the safest state in the nation. Why? Criminals don't want to do business here, at least not the kind that are going to affront you. We do have criminals here, but like Washington, D.C., it's done through the back doors. So understand that. And folks, a government that wants to take your guns is not doing it as a benevolent organization, as an organization that is working for your benefit. They're taking your guns, folks, because they are in fear of you because of their own actions. That's why they want your guns. They know what the statistics prove. They know what history demonstrates, that people who can protect themselves live freely and as sovereigns. They understand that. They don't want you to be free and sovereign, and that's why they're after your guns. Your children must attend a school that doesn't educate. Your Christian values can't be taught, according to the state. You read about the current news in a regulated press. You pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Well, let's look at the education system in this country. And I've asked you before to please read the book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Iserby, Undersecretary of Education during the Reagan administration. And this book has all the documents in it with regards to No Child Left Behind and all, Goals 2000 and all these things. Folks, all these programs are meant to do two things. One, to bring the allegiance of the child to the state, or to the educator, which is the state. And the second thing it's meant to do, and away from the parent and away from the family. And the second thing it's meant to do is to literally dummy you down. Take away the classic education where people can observe, reason, go through a thought process and come out to a conclusion, and then have the ability to act on that conclusion. They don't want that. They want worker bees. They want people who are allegiance to the state. They do not want a free-thinking people. And folks, you can say, well, I can homeschool my children. Yeah, you can, but you're going to have a battle doing it, although it's the greatest education movement of all of education right now. A lot of parents are waking up, particularly here in Vermont, and homeschooling their children, which is phenomenal. I applaud you for doing it. I know when I had my businesses and I would have to hire and fire people, I'll tell you what, folks, as soon as I saw somebody was homeschooled, I hired them. And they were always a better employee. They could always do things. They could think on their feet. And my God, they could count change back. Imagine that. That really used to impress me, that these kids could count change back, because the average kid today can't do it. If the machine's not thinking for them, the thought process is gone. They can't do the math in their heads. So, okay, you can say you have the ability to homeschool your child, albeit you're going to do it against the tide. But look what also happens. You still have to finance the state education system, okay? It doesn't matter that you are no longer, your child is not a financial burden or a logistic burden on the school system of the state. They force you to still supplement monies to that system, even though you obviously disagree with it or are unhappy with it, because you wouldn't have taken your child out of the school system to begin with if you were happy with it or satisfied with the criteria and the results of the education. So you're still locked into it. Again, although I applaud you greatly for homeschooling your children. Your Christian values can't be taught according to the state. Folks, when you read the founding era of this country, everything was based on Christianity. Everything was, all right? And basically what we've gone away from is, if you want to redirect people's thinking and you want to redirect their lives, To take them off this road that they've been on, you have to take away their foundation of morality and education. And that's exactly what the schools have done. They've taken away the foundation of the ideals and the laws that were part of our system because they wanted to take you away from it. So they had to create an abyss where, oh, I don't have a foundation to understand that I'm even being taken adrift from that. So that is exactly what's going on with the court system, and it's exactly what's going on with the public education system. All right? They've not only taken your allegiance away from the family and to the state, now they've actually taken it that, oh, we can't have God in our documents, we can't have God in our ideology. Folks, you think this is true because you don't understand, you haven't taken the time to research your own foundation. What road are we not to drive away from? What road are we to stay on? And this is exactly what's going on with the education system. You read about the current news in a regulated press. Now, we've touched on this in a little bit, folks. Who actually, have you ever wondered why all the news on the print, the radio, or the television is all the same, minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, no matter what channel you're on, it's all the same, okay? That is because your news or your management, it's not really news, it's management, where they want to take you, what road they want to take you down, is being derived through agencies that control the media. Now, at some point in this show, we're going to get into this in a lot of depth because it is a very important part of the picture. But basically, all your information is the same because there is one agency controlling the information that is brought out to and circulated into the news systems, the mainstream media, if you would. And that's exactly what they're doing. All right? So now sometimes you may get a little bit of a spin on it. Again, part of the divide paradigm to make you think that there is a choice left and right and so forth. But, folks, I think we've all come to the understanding that we have one political party. And that one political party is called the Globalization Party. And then we have two fractions of that Globalization Party. And you know them as the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. But they're two fractions of the same entity with a little spin to it to make you believe that there's actually choice. There's not. And I will tell you another thing. When you get outside this mainstream media and you start doing your own research and you start analyzing the events that are taking place today, I think you will come to the startling conclusion that we are in trouble. We are in trouble as a nation. We are in trouble as a civilization. And our daily lives are being controlled by foreign banking entities through the art of deception. And next time you click channel to channel to channel, ask yourself, why am I really basically seeing the same thing here on every single channel? It's because that information is being controlled. Okay, now to another interesting part of this poem. You pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Now, about probably 5 or 6 shows back now, we got into who the IRS is and particularly who the IRS is not. And in their own writings and in their own guidelines and through the congressional record and so forth, we demonstrated quite clearly to you that the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, as you know it, is not part of the United States government. It's not part of the corporation, as we demonstrated to you, the United States government. You remember we demonstrated that the definition of the United States actually has 3 definitions. The United States actually has the geographical area that make up the United States. Then you have the United States, which is the United States of America, which is the unions, the 50 states that make up the union. And then you have the United States of America, which is the corporation. And it is the corporation that went bankrupt on March 9th, 1933, It went insolvent to these bankers, these international bankers that took over our money system in 1913. And if you've been watching this show, for almost a year now, obviously we've gotten into that in quite depth, and we've showed that to you. If you haven't seen our shows, folks, we invite you to go to www.katv.org, and you can review all of the previous shows and get caught up to date. But again, back to the IRS. Now, when you read the IRS code, you will see that the income tax is voluntary. Yes, I did say voluntary. The income tax is voluntary. It's not only unconstitutional, but it is voluntary. And the IRS, through de facto powers, has been enforcing this on the American people. Folks, in 1942, under 25% of the American people volunteered to pay the income tax. But through the deception of language, they turned it into the victory tax. Oh, you don't want to support the troops? You don't want to pay your income taxes to support the war effort and the troops that are fighting for your liberties? Remember all that? If you were living in them days, you remember all that. And obviously, if you're a student of history, you can look that up and read that. Through deception of language, they had the American people go full force into paying the income tax. Of course, back then it was only supposed to be, we went over it one time at the show, I think it was like 3% at the max. Where are we now? We're in a 30 percentile bracket. Okay, some people even higher. So, again, the IRS is a foreign collection agency for a foreign corporation that you know as the Federal Reserve banking system. Now, also with regards to the IRS and the income tax, about 5 or 6 shows ago, we got some documentation out from the Grace Commission. Ronald Reagan, when he took over as president, he went to form a commission. They called it the Grace Commission. And what he basically did was he said, okay, I want to find out where the revenue that's coming in to the government, through the income tax, through the tariffs, through the foreign tariffs, domestic tariffs, all these different tariffs and taxes, where this money was going to be spent. And if you remember, we read it verbatim to you, word for word from the Grace Commission, that not one penny of your income tax money goes to the operations of the United States government. Not one. Do you remember where they all went? They went to pay a fictitious interest to the Federal Reserve Bank into the International Monetary Fund. So I want you to think about this. The bankers just got 28.3 trillion with a T dollars, okay? But before we could give them this fictitious debt, to relieve the debt, the money, we had to get permission from them to print the money to give to them in the first place. Are you with me? So what happened? We gave them $28.3 trillion because we got their permission to do it and to print it, thus creating an interest bond due on the $28.3 trillion that they got originally that they're going to collect from the bond on the interest. What a scam. It's like I'm going to tell you, okay, you owe me $1,000, but I'm going to give you permission to print the $1,000 to give to me, and now you're going to have to pay the interest because I gave you permission to print the money to give to me in the first place. Folks, I know that as a scam. And if you were honest with yourself, you would consider that a scam yourself. And another reason why the IRS, there's two facets when you really do their research and their studying, why they wanted to have an IRS collection agency. One, they wanted to be able to stimulate money so they could conquer foreign lands through the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. All right? And that's what they've done. All of these operations that the IMF does throughout the world, the raping of jungles and peoples, you're financing all that through your labors, through paying the income tax. That's where it all goes to. Again, because a private bank gave us permission to create our own currency, our own credit. It's actually their credit. They gave us permission to do it, so we got to pay them an interest on it. The other thing is, and more importantly to the bankers, was this. The bankers understand the history of currency and money. They understand that there has never been a fiat currency, which is what we have, and we've demonstrated that numerous times on this program, to ever survive the test of history. There's never been one. And at one show, we went over all the cultures, and there was a lot of them, from the Romans, the Greeks, and we got down to the Americans, that have never the Germans have never survived, the fiat currency never survived the test of history. And the reason why was because as it becomes less value and less value, they have to print more of it. You know this is inflation. So what they did, if there's too much money in circulation and it becomes less value and the more money in circulation, the less value it is. So what they did was they created the IRS so they could have control of the M3. The M3 is the money supply. They would have control and be able to take currency out of the circulation so they could keep it from being so inflammatory and less value, so they could control that, the ins and outs, the plus and minuses of the supply of the money within circulation. And that's why they did that. The icing on the cake to them was, oh, now we have billions and trillions of dollars every year to this private foreign corporation that we can give to the IMF and go out and conquer the world with it. That is where your income tax money goes to. And we read this verbatim to you in the Grace Commission. So, when you think of the IRS, understand you're dealing with a foreign non-government organization that is part of the Federal Reserve banking system. Then your monies go to the International Monetary Fund. Folks, if you look at a check, when you look at the back of the check, when they stamp it, it will actually say on it, Federal Reserve Banking System. The endorsement is Federal Reserve Banking System. Very important that you understand that. But it says you pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Now, folks, why do you do this? Why do you pay a tax you do not owe to a foreign corporation? I'm going to tell you why. Because you're scared. I don't blame you for being scared. They can ruin your life. They can ruin your life. I don't blame you for being scared. But again, that's a barometer as to where we are with regards to our relationship to the government and all these bankers. That's where we are. So, if you ever wanted to, if you think that, this can't be true, this can't be right, you can go on the internet and you can Google, is the income tax voluntary? You can look it up. You can go to the IRS code. You can go to the IRS sites and look it up. It's voluntary. I've had 2 IRS agents literally come out and say to me, the income tax, yes, it is voluntary. But there's a hitch here. Once you engage in contract with this foreign corporation, you have to fulfill your end of the deal. You have to fulfill what you've agreed to sign. Because believe it or not, folks, you filled out an application to have money taken out of your paycheck and to put yourself under the guise of the IRS code. You requested it. You volunteered for it. You filled out an application. When you get into the word application, it means you are doing this voluntarily, wholeheartedly on your own actions. You are desiring this. And how did they do this? They did this, again, through manipulation of the media. You never hear about the people who beat the IRS in court. Never. And there's been a lot of them. There's been a tremendous amount of them. The ones you do hear about are the ones whose properties are taken, or the ones who, unfortunately, they're political prisoners and held in jail forever and a day. Them are the people you hear about. And why do you think that is, folks? Because that is an instrument of fear. It's an instrument of fear. They want you to hear of this. They don't want you to hear of the Joe Currents and the Joseph Bannisters and the many, many others that have beaten the IRS in court. They don't want you to hear that. They want you to hear the ones that wound up with their properties being taken and then being in jail, like I just said. So you would say, well, you know what? I'm going to pay this just so they don't come after me. Folks, they used to call that the mafia. Growing up, if you had a business shop and you didn't want the mafia to come and kick in your doors and harass you and your business, you paid an extortion fee to them. It was an extortion fee. You did it out of fear. You paid the mafia out of fear that they would leave you alone and protect you from other people who were trying to do the same rackets. Well, that's what you're paying when you pay an income tax to this foreign corporation, you're paying an extortion fee because you are living in fear of their detrimental actions against your life. Look in the mirror. Understand that. That's just the exact... Do you desire to give this money to them, your hard labors? Do you desire to keep tabs of your daily life with receipts and everything else? No. Does a free sovereign person do that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But, again, because you're living in fear of the actions that may be taken against you, you fill out the forms, you contract with this organization, and then you pay their extortion fee with zero accountability coming from them. Folks, we gave the bankers $28.3 trillion. We don't even know where the money went. All we do know is that we've got to pay them interest to give, because they gave us permission to print this money in the first place. That's all we know. And what did they do with this money? They took a devaluing currency, a fiat currency, and they purchased intrinsic value commodities with it. Some of it was gold and silver, some of it was land, some of it was financial institutions that were in good standing. Okay? Do you remember back when in the first 2 or 3 shows we got into when they met at Jekyll Island, the 5 things or 6 things they really wanted to do? Okay, we're going to do this, but what's our game plan here? And do you remember the last one? They knew the system was going to fail, again, because they understand history. All right? They knew it was going to fail, so they set up this cabal. They implemented the system. It only took them 16 years to bankrupt, which was one time the most prosperous nations in all of history. So they bankrupted that, and then they went and they put us into debt and they slowly but surely took out all the intrinsic value, backing up our currency. Do you remember we went through the 1792 and 89 coinage acts of this country? Remember a dollar had intrinsic value of 25.8 grams of gold and a 15-to-1 ratio of silver. Well, they took all that out, folks, over a period of time until in the early 1970s, they finally took us off the standard, and now we have a fiat currency with a fractional banking system. So there's nothing backing up our money but our living in fear of this institution. That's why. Folks, during the Great Depression, I'm doing a study on the Great American Depression right now. And I've read a lot of books on it, and it's really become an interesting study. But the thing that's jumping out at me the most is, number one, which I already knew, the manipulation of the private bank, the Federal Reserve, to get us into this situation to begin with. How they did it, the mechanics of it, how they put everybody in debt. Then they started to pull out the M3, the money supply, so you couldn't pay the debt that they instituted. All right, then they collateralized all the debt. But the 6th thing that they wanted to do, because they knew this was going to collapse, they wanted to be able to transfer the liability to the taxpayers of the American people. And that's exactly what's going on with this so-called bailout. $28.3 trillion that we know of. That figure is actually about 90 days old. We don't even know how further down the road we've gone with it because they haven't released that information. Bernie Sanders said to Ben Bernanke in one of the Senate hearings, he says, "Mr. Bernanke, are you going to tell the American people where all this money went?" And Ben Bernanke looked right at the camera and just bluntly said, "No." Google that. Go ahead and Google, Bernie Sanders asked Ben Bernanke where the money went. He just matter-of-factly says, no. Did the federal government have any kind of recourse and or jurisdiction on the private corporation known as the Federal Reserve to mandate and to be sure we know what the accountability where this money went? Absolutely not. Why not? Because the Federal Reserve is in a superior position to the United States government, the corporation, because the corporation went insolvent to these bankers. If I'm insolvent to you, I am going to live by the dictates of what you dictate to me, because I'm insolvent to you. And it's the same way with the United States government, the corporation, the United States government, to the foreign bankers that you know as the Federal Reserve banking system. So that's why Ben Bernanke is not going to tell the American people or any representative thereof, the American people, where this money went. He has no need to. Why should he expose his criminality? Why should he expose the scam that he just made out with $28.3 trillion when he doesn't have to? He's in a superior position. He knows that. And this is one of the reasons why Ron Paul, a representative from Congress, was taken out of the Republican debates during when the debates were going on in the last election. Because when Ron Paul said the American people are going to turn things around, they have first got to gain control of their financial and money system. Well, anyone that understands ABCs, what is that telling you? That you do not have control of your money system. You know, what was it Edmund Rothschild said? Give me control of a nation's currency. I care not who makes its laws. Why doesn't he care? Because he's controlling everything from the top. He's going to have a couple of dog and pony shows and some puppets there for you to revel in. But he's got control because he's controlling the purse strings. It's really that simple. And because you live in fear of an agency called the Internal Revenue Service, you are financing it through your fear because you pay this extortion fee to these foreign bankers. And then they take that money and they conquer the world with it. So, you pay a tax you do not owe to please the IRS. Your money is no longer made of silver or of gold. We just sort of touched on that. And they both interlink here because all the intrinsic value of your currency has been robbed. You've been robbed, folks. You remember we got into President Kennedy when he signed Executive Order 11110? And he realized that he did an order of Fort Knox. There was no gold at Fort Knox, but there was $2.8 trillion worth of silver left. That's it. That was all. Out of all the wealth that was collected by the Federal Reserve Bank, in 1933, that's all that was left out of the entire wealth of the most prosperous nation known to history. So he started, what did he do? He issued greenbacks, which is a token taken from Abraham Lincoln, but he issued certificates, silver certificates. And what he was doing is he was taking away the control of the money changes as they've become known through history. He was taking control back to the United States government of the issuance of currency. And the Federal Reserve was about to lose their power of control of the currency and, more importantly, be exposed as to what they were and what they are today. So Kennedy, really, folks, I believe, was the last president to really make the effort to turn things around. And before he did this, he gave a very interesting speech on secret societies in the United States. And if you wish, please Google JFK Secret Society speech. Take the time to listen to the man's words. You will be fascinated by what he is telling you, and he is the President of the United States. Do you think he has an understanding how things are truly operating being in the position of President of the United States? Obviously he did. And anyone in my generation knows that we did not, Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot John Kennedy. He didn't have the capabilities to shoot John Kennedy, and that's another thing for another subject for another show. But understanding that, you have to ask yourself, okay, who was responsible for this, and why? And the whys are Executive Order 11110. So our money is no longer made of silver or of gold, which is mandated by the Constitution, right? We all know that this was all mandated by the Constitution, must have intrinsic value of silver and gold, and what else? Article 1, Section 8. What else? That only the Congress will have control of the issuance of the currency, not a private foreign bank known as the Federal Reserve banking system. You've traded your wealth for paper so your life can be controlled. Well, we have, because there's no more intrinsic value backing up our currency. So if someone else is controlling the paper, what you're going to recognize and accept as a medium of exchange, do you have control? No, you don't. Because I can dictate whether I want to have a short supply, a large supply. I can dictate credit. I can dictate debt. I can dictate the laws that are going to be made upon your life because I am controlling the currency. And this is why they go forward. And this is the link in the poem where you've traded your wealth for paper so your life can be controlled. Your wealth was the intrinsic value of gold and silver. You've lost it to a paper currency that has it's completely fiat, no intrinsic value. And the people who control the issuance of the currency are the ones who are controlling our lives. It's very simple. And history just demonstrates this over and over and over again. You pay for crimes that make our nation turn from God in shame. You've taken Satan's number as you've traded in your name. And I think what they're speaking of here, folks, in this poem is more of the biblical sense of, that we're all going to be marked with a number. Well, we do. We're all marked with a number. You know it as your Social Security number. All right? Now, I still have my original Social Security card. And that was from 69. Bold red letters right across it, not to be used for identification purposes. Right on the card. Okay? You're actually breaking federal law, folks, when you put your Social Security number on any document that is outside the Social Security Administration. But you have to do it, don't you? Or so you think you do. But you're being told you have to do it. Why? Because they're not associating the connection with you with Thomas D'Ambra, the flesh and blood human being. They're communicating with you through a corporate entity known as a nom de guerre through that Social Security number. And as long as you use that and put that down, you are acknowledging you are in that venue of law. You're in that corporate law. And that's why. So the Social Security number, again, it's going to be benevolent for you. We're going to take this money and we're going to put it aside for you in this nice little kitty over here. So when you get to be nice and old, you can retire and things will be well. Right? No, folks, that's not how it goes. Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system. Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president after John Kennedy, he was really the one that robbed the Social Security funds and began that whole process. But this is how it works. We all pay into Social Security, and then they take the small piece of the pie that's got to go out to pay for the recipients of the Social Security money. Now, what happens to the rest of that fund? Is that put aside in a kitty collecting interest or putting in gold or silver? No. That is put into the general budget to be used at the whim of the Congress and or the president. Now, did they tell you that when you filled out your forms? When you volunteered for this contract? No, they didn't. They just told you there's going to be a nice little fund here for you when you get done. Folks, between the devaluation of the currency, which creates the inflation, and between them robbing the fund, because, folks, what happened to all that money that all them people put in for all that time? Think about it. All the baby boomers are coming through. The Social Security program is going to go bust. Folks, what happened to all the money, the millions and trillions of dollars that the most prosperous, one of the most prosperous generations, because they weren't plagued by a lot of domestic violence. There was some during the 60s, but it was really minuscule on the base of history. It wasn't so tumultuous that our economic system faltered. What happened to all that money that all them people put in for all that time? It was taken and used in a separate fund and put into what you know as a general budget. Sad but true. Is the news media going to tell you that? The news media going to come out and say to you, oh, well, you know, guys, basically you've been robbed. We lied to you. No. So now today, the real inflation rate, if you took the formula that they used in 1980 to figure out inflation, in 2009, the real inflation rate was 6.1% in this country. But they come out with another formula, I think it's the 14th one since 1980, to change what they know as a CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is a barometer, if you would, of the inflation rate in the country. And they changed the formula, just like they changed the formula for unemployment. The true, real unemployment rate in this country right now, folks, is 21.8%. The real unemployment rate. But you see what they do with unemployment. If you don't collect in benefits anymore because you ran out of benefits because there's no work, well, they don't count you in that equation no more. If you're in the military, they count you on some equations as hired employees. For manufacturing base, you know how they keep the manufacturing up? Because if you flip hamburgers at McDonald's or Burger King now, you are included in the manufacturing equation. Used to be in the service industry, but now you're in the manufacturing equation. All right? So what they do is they change these formulas to come out with the means that they're looking for. So with Social Security, there is an entity called COLA, Cost of Living Allowance. It's an acronym, COLA, Cost of Living Allowance. And what this does is they take the Consumer Price Index and they'll multiply it by whatever the inflation rate for your pay raise as a Social Security recipient and or military retiree. All right? So they changed the formula to keep it zero, which they did, admittedly. The real inflation rate is 6.1%, so you don't get a pay raise through your benefits. You're actually losing purchasing power through the devaluation of the currency because the 6.1% inflation was not accounted for in the COLA equation. Think about that. Not only did they rob you your entire life, now they're lying to you when it's actually time for them to give you the money that you put in for all these years. They're changing the rules of the game in midterm of the game, obviously not to your benefit. This is just a small example of how you do not have control when someone else is printing your medium of exchange and or credit for you. You've been lied to, you've been robbed. And now they're taking the last squeeze out of the rock to get the last drop of blood before the whole thing crushes. We were talking earlier, folks, about 6 months ago, I made mention, if you want to, on this program, if you want to see the future of the United States, keep your eyes on Greece. Now, those of you, and there are a couple that I know of, did do that, and they have been watching Greece, and they're shocked at what's going on today in Greece. And the reason why? Because they're in the same predicament we are. They do not have control of the issuance of their currency. You've given government control to those who do you harm, so they can padlock churches and steal the family farm, and keep our country deep in debt, put men of God in jail, harass your fellow countrymen while corrupted courts prevail. Folks, you've given government control to those who do you harm. I want you to ask yourself and come up with an honest answer. What can you do openly and honestly without permission from the entity that you know as the government? I don't care if it's the local level, state level, federal level. I want you to come up with one thing that you can do openly and freely without getting permission from, or without paying them a fee to do that act. Because I've been thinking about it, and the only one I can come up with is breathing. And pretty soon with the cap and trade, we're about to be paying carbon taxes for the privilege of breathing. And I know you're saying, oh, come on, Tom, that's far-fetched. Folks, we touched on it a little bit in previous shows, but the cap and trade's right around the corner. And everything that produces carbon dioxide, like yourself, is going to be getting carbon credits. You want to drive that car? You're producing carbon dioxide. You're going to pay for carbon credits in every gallon of gasoline you buy, every quart of oil you buy, the windshield wiper that you use so you can see your way going down the road, the tires that you're riding on. You're going to be paying carbon taxes for that. Oh, you want that nice T-bone steak? Guess what produces carbon? Cows. You're going to pay a carbon tax to eat that fine steak. Yes. You're going to be paying carbon taxes to have that steak shipped to you. You're going to be paying carbon taxes to have that steak cooled and being shipped to you. You're going to be paying carbon taxes to breathe if you don't get off the couch and get involved. And you know, I have heard this from so many people. Oh, Tom, I'll never see whatever the subject may be, this particular thing, in my lifetime. And I have a good friend of mine that says that, used to say that to me all the time. And now, he doesn't say it anymore. Because it has come true in his lifetime. And what was fantasy yesteryear is now reality today. And that's exactly where with this poem talking about, you think the government is this benevolent organization and all they're doing is they lie and they take from you. Your public servants don't uphold the solemn oath they've sworn. Your daughters visit doctors so their children won't be born. Your leadership artillery and guns to foreign shores, and send your sons to slaughter fighting other people's wars. First of all, folks, the public servants don't uphold the solemn oath. And the reason being they don't uphold their solemn oath is because most of the acts that they do are basically unconstitutional. They're very much unconstitutional, okay? So they've sworn an oath to this Constitution, but they put it to the wayside. They don't, as Jefferson said, bind them down by the chains of the Constitution. They're not bound down by anything. The only time they take notice is when their political ploys and the cronies and the people that supplement their political campaigns say, hey, if you don't do this, we're not going to do that. They take notice then. But as for you having an effect because you do not hold them down to their oaths, it's a non-threat to them. It means nothing to them. Your daughters visit doctors so their children won't be born. I could go on all day about this, but let me say about the new Obamacare bill. Folks, your money is now going to be going to funds to supplement and finance worldwide abortion. Think of that. You're responsible for the murders of millions of babies in the future. Your leadership artillery and guns to foreign shores. You send your sons to slaughter fighting other people's wars. As we've gone over when we talked about the book War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated Marines in the history of the United States Marine Corps. And he talked, remember we read it verbatim, we talked about the profit ratios of war. And I forget what was one American rubber company, their average profit was like 16%, but it was over 1,200% during war. They don't fight wars, folks, for patriotic reasons. They're fighting wars for the benefit of the corporations. And when you get to that corporation, what happens? We, as a country, have to go in greater depth to finance the mechanisms of war. To who? To the very same people that just got $28.3 trillion, to the very same people who gave us permission to print that $28.3 trillion that we have to pay an interest to them now because they gave us the permission to give them the money in the first place. Think about where we are. You know, look beyond the dog and pony show. Oh, Saddam's a bad guy. Osama, Ben Forgotten's a bad guy. We got to go get these guys. Oh, Iran's going to have nuclear weapons in 10 years. We got to go do something about that. Come on, folks. Wake up. Look what's in front of you. And, of course, the sons to slaughter, fighting other people's wars. We have not declared war in this country since December 8th, 1941. And how many sons and daughters have died fighting other people's wars for the gain and profit of the few? Can you regain the freedom for which we fought and died? Or don't you have the courage or the faith to stand with pride? Are there no more values for which you'll fight to save? Or do you wish your children to live in fear and be a slave? Folks, this right here is asking you, what are you going to do? Are you going to continue to live in fear? Are you going to allow that your children are bonded to the Bank of International Settlements to the birth certificate? Are you going to allow the education system to indoctrinate your children as to thoughts and ideals against your own morality? Because if you're not going to, you have to stand up at some point. You have to stand up at some point. And the time is nearer and nearer to where we're not going to have the ability anymore. Or do you wish your children to live in fear and be a slave as you are today? As you are today. What are we leaving for our children? Are we leaving a bright, sovereign future of prosperity? Or are we leaving a chain-burdened, debt-ridden future of no prosperity? Because if we continue on the road that we're on, folks, you have got to come to the conclusion that it's the latter and not the former. Sons of the Republic, arise and take a stand. Defend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. Preserve our great republic and each God-given right, and pray to God to keep the torch of freedom burning bright. Folks, sons of the Republic, does it say sons of the democracy? Sons of the Republic, arise and take a stand. Defend the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. So what's the supreme law of the land, folks? The United States Constitution. Do you know it? When's the last time you took the time to read the Constitution of the United States? Because if you don't know the language, if you don't know the rights that are in it, then you do not have them. What was it that Jefferson said? Those who expect to be ignorant and free expect what never was and will never be. Without knowledge, without an understanding of your foundation, you cannot go forward in freedom. Someone else is going to dictate to you. And where are your rights coming from? Your God-given rights. But they've flipped that around to thinking that we get our rights from this benevolent organization we call the government. No, 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 no. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights is not a declaration to you of what you can do. It's a declaration to the corporation, to the federal government that you know is the United States of America, as to what it can do and what it cannot do and what it cannot encroach upon. So you don't have to go looking, oh, I can't do this because of this. No, no, no. It's telling the federal government what it can do and what it can't do. It wasn't made to keep you at bay. It was made to keep them at bay. The federal government was not supposed to be involved in the union. It wasn't supposed to be involved in the states. Remember, territories, enclaves, and districts only. Again, they've turned this around because you do not have a foundation of knowledge and understanding as to the founding documents of our country, and it comes back right here. How can you stand up for the Constitution of the United States, folks, if you do not understand it? If you do not understand its implementation into our lives, and if you do not understand who it is stopping encroachment upon. Okay? Important. Very, very important. As I awoke, he vanished in the midst from whence he came. His words were true. We are not free. We have ourselves to blame. For even now as tyrants trample each God-given right, we only watch and tremble, too afraid to stand and fight. If he stood by your bedside in a dream while you're asleep, and wondered what remains of our rights he fought to keep, what would be your answer if he called out from the grave, is this still the land of the free and the home of the brave? Folks, we have accountability. And when we make the transition to the next life, we're going to have to account for our actions here. What we allowed, what we did not allow, what we did and what we did not do. And we have to think about future generations. You know, there's this whole thing about the me generation, and that may be true, but we have got to get to the point where, okay, we're going to ask questions, we're going to have honest answers, and we're going to act upon those honest answers. And until we've come to that point, as a people, we're going to continue to live in debt and at the dictates of the very bankers who have placed us in debt. A lot of information there for a poem, but it's always been one of my favorite poems because I think the words are so strikingly true as to where we are as a nation and where we are as a people. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. We were going to go on to some other information with regards to the history of civilizations, and then we're going to get into what I feel is one of the grandiose and most effective tools that we have to turn this around, and it has to do with grand juries. So at this point, for the sake of time, we have to close. As always, we are very appreciative that you take the time from your busy day to watch our show. And as always, we remind you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.